Hello everyone, and a Happy New Year. Thank you for signing on to the Wharton Esherick Museum's first Spotlight Talk of 2025. As you likely already know from the topic of today's talk, we're traditionally closed during the months of January and February, as our staff is hard at work preparing for our reopening in March and the rest of the year ahead. My name is Ethan Snyder. I'm the Manager of Collections and Public Programming here at the Wharton Esherick Museum, and I'm really pleased to share with you all some of the projects that we're undertaking during this 2-month closure. Generally, we take these 2 months to kind of reflect on the previous year and to recalibrate for the year ahead. And it's an important time for all of our staff here at the museum because this time allows us to tackle projects that we aren't usually able to work on the rest of the year when Esherick Studio is open to the public. In January and February, or I guess I should say leading up to January and February, our to-do lists grow and grow as the year progresses. Thus, it's always a time when we have to be pragmatic because there's never enough time to finish all of the ambitious projects that we kind of set out for ourselves. So it behooves us to prioritize and complete as much of these to-do lists as possible as we really eagerly look forward to welcoming the public back in March. Today we're going to cover first some of the formative and the ongoing projects that broke ground this past year. Then we'll discuss some of what our staff is currently working on during this closure before we touch on some of the exciting projects that we very quietly completed during this past season that you might not have heard about quite yet. And what I'm sharing today is truly only a small sample of all of the different projects that the Wharton Esherick Museum's very dedicated staff is working on. The first thing that we're going to cover today is a project that arguably stood out from business as usual at the Esherick Museum that greatly influenced what our year looked like and which is still ongoing. And that's the 1966 Silo Preservation Project that's been spearheaded by our very, very brilliant building preservation specialist, Andrew Gustine. It's true that our bread and butter is preserving Esherick Studio for the public to see for generations to come, but a preservation project at this scale doesn't happen and thankfully doesn't need to happen every day. After much preparation, research, analysis, and collaboration, Andy truly broke ground on a project to address the masonry and stucco silo structure on the studio this past year. Because we have 2 previous spotlights on this topic that go pretty in depth, and we'll link you to these talks in the follow-up email to this one. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it today, but if you're not familiar, the short version is that this project was meant to and is continually meant to address some plaster and stucco damage on the interior and exterior of the silo that has allowed moisture to infiltrate the structure. And we can see the symptoms of this infiltration on the left with the wall inside of the kitchen. And earlier this year, in order to try to remedy this issue, a newly discovered layer of insulation that's between the walls on the second floor of the silo was removed. And over the summertime, we engaged the expertise of Andrew Fearon at Heritage Conservation to clean the exterior of the silo and patch any cracks that water might have been getting through. And here in the middle, you see Andrew Fearon at work cleaning the silo structure to find those cracks to later patch them. Now that many of these issues have been addressed by now, it's time to closely monitor the temperature and relative humidity inside of the silo to see if this work removing the insulation and the work on the outside will help to remedy this issue. We'll be looking to see whether the issue with the plaster inside of that kitchen that we saw here begins to taper off, and we hope that it doesn't get worse. And as long as it doesn't get worse, we can start to feel good that the steps that we've taken are hopefully addressing the issue. And the images that we're looking at here on this slide are photos that were taken in the process of removing that layer of insulation on the second floor of the silo. So you can see that it's turned into an active workspace. Here in the middle, you can see that patch showing that insulation that was removed, and then the bare wall that is behind it. So just this month, Angie Gustine has installed a different kind of monitoring system than we use elsewhere in the studio to capture data about environmental conditions inside of the silo. So if you've been to WEM in the past, you may have noticed these small temperature readers that are tucked inside various parts of the studio. Here we can see one that's hanging in the kitchen to monitor the temperature inside. But the one that Andy's using that we see here is a little bit different. So what's different about the monitors that Andy is now working with for the silo is that it's a particular type of monitoring system that works with probes that can be inserted directly into the silo's masonry. Thus, instead of merely reading the conditions inside the studio or inside of the silo's rooms, we can actually monitor the situation within the silo's walls and masonry. And here we can see photographs of the silo's second floor after the insulation was removed and the probes and monitors installed in the walls here. So again, we'll be closely monitoring the conditions over the next year or so, gathering lots of data and drawing conclusions from that data about how successful the treatments on the exterior and interior of the silo were. So another particularly formative project that broke ground this past year, and which you've undoubtedly heard a lot about, was the opening of the Crafted World of Wharton Esherick exhibition at the Brandywine Museum of Art this past October. The exhibition brings together over 80 pieces sourced exclusively from Esherick's studio, many of which haven't left that building in decades, if ever. And together, this collection of work spans the breadth of Wharton Esherick's experimentations in media, and it includes prints, paintings, photographs, sketches, furniture, sculpture, and models for architectural work as well. So this exhibition closed at the Brandywine on January 19th, and as of last week, all of the pieces were carefully deinstalled, packed, and crated. And as of tomorrow, they'll be heading out to their next destination, Madison, Wisconsin, where the show opens at the Chazen Museum of Art on February 17th. So if you have friends or family in that area who you think might enjoy a show of Wharton Esherick's work, be sure to let them know that it's coming to them soon. So preparing for the show to open was truly an all hands on deck occasion that involved everyone at WEM, from operations, communications, social media, membership, and front of house staff to curatorial collections and conservation. Our curator, Emily Zilber, and I have been working closely with the Brandywine to ensure that all the pieces are handled, packed, and shipped safely, and with staff at the Chazen to review exhibition designs and provide guidance that will help Esherick's work be installed safely and for all to enjoy. So this is a great segue into another project that we've had ongoing at the museum adjacent to the crafted world during our closure. So there's now a new section on our website called Recent Press that you see here, where we're able to highlight all of the wonderful stories and press that Wharton Esherick and the crafted world are garnering as Esherick's work left the studio for the wider world to enjoy. There you can check out press ranging from local publications like Philadelphia Magazine and WHYY to more national publications like Architectural Digest, Frederick Magazine, and Antiques and the Arts Weekly. And here you can see the really wonderful full-page spread that the Wharton Esherick Museum was featured in at the back of Architectural Digest magazine just a few months ago. This was incredibly exciting for all of us to see in print in a publication of this magnitude. And press is still coming out. So just a few weeks ago, you may have seen another wonderful story featured in the Philadelphia Inquirer by arts and culture writer Julia Shipley. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend checking it out. It is a wonderful piece about Esherick. So much of the collection's work over this closure period has, of course, been dedicated to the exhibition as we prepped for the show to be deinstalled from the Brandywine's beautiful galleries, packed up in crates, and loaded onto a truck to be sent to Madison, Wisconsin. So when an artwork travels or a collection of artwork travels, it's generally accompanied by a courier, which in short is an artwork's travel companion. I have the pleasure of being the travel companion for Wharton Esherick's work for this leg of the trip, which is very humbling. And the role of the courier is to really oversee the packing and crating of objects to ensure that art is packed as snugly as possible and won't move in transit. It'll travel safely, and that appropriate conservation grade packing materials are going to be used as well. A courier is also there to approve packing before any crates are closed up, available to answer any questions as kind of the de facto expert on the objects from their collection, and to give advice on how particular objects might be packed or what parts of a piece of furniture, for example, might need the most attention depending on its condition or fragility. And couriers are also present upon unpacking on the other end to ensure that objects are handled safely and installed in ways that protect them from being touched, bumped into accidentally, picked up, etc., while on view for the public. So, other collections projects that we're completing during this closure include things like the regular deep cleaning of the studio, rehousing some prints, inventorying our small collection storage area that has taken on a little bit of a heavier lift now that the crafted world is out in the world, and other tasks like that. So, another exciting collections-based project that we just completed in the last couple of weeks was having our entire oral history collection digitized. We engaged the expertise of George Blood LP, who's a leading specialist in digitizing and preserving archival materials and moving images to do this work with us. So, our collection of physical audio and moving image materials mainly includes media types that we at the museum don't really have the technology to access any longer. This collection is made up mainly of reel to reels, cassettes, and those smaller cassettes that hold digital videos. I think that there's also a great concern that if we tried to do this in house, something could get messed up, and it was just best to leave it to the experts to handle this work for us. And over time, some of this material has been transferred to CDs by various staff members. However, during those transfers, so much of the original quality of that media gets lost. So now that all of this media is digitized from the original pieces, we have access to oral histories that we've never been able to listen to before and directly from that original media, which is incredibly exciting for us. And while we've shown this video of Wharton Esherick in 1958, helping to install his solo show at the Museum of Contemporary Crafts in both a past spotlight and in our visitor center, we've only been able to access a copy that was digitized from a previous transfer to cassette. So it went from reel to cassette to digital video, and in that process lost a lot of its original quality. So I have this slide here to show us that difference in quality between the transfer digitization here and the direct digitization on the right. And even in just this kind of change merely in quality and clarity of the video, we can see that Wharton Esherick is wearing a pinstripe suit. And that's something that we would have never been able to glean from that video that we had been working with in the past. So it's really exciting to be able to learn more information through clarity and things like that. And on this next slide, just so we can show it off, I will play a brief clip of this digitized video. We have the spokes from the film present because it shows us a little bit more information on the left-hand side. Um, and again, it just shows us what this installation was like with a clarity that we were not able to glean before. So I'll skip around a little bit so we can just see various stills or different excerpts. And here we can see the staff at the Museum of Contemporary Crafts putting Esherick's staircase together, and Esherick overseeing the work and helping them do that. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on from this, but we will definitely explore ways to share this with everyone so you have access to this video and can watch it on your own time. So in the past year, we've completed some exciting projects for the museum that we just have either finished quietly or just didn't really have the time to announce. And those are mainly conservation projects around the studio. The one that we're going to talk about here was a project to replace the curtain in Esherick's bedroom that had seen better days. It was used at least for 50 years, dating back to the museum's founding, and is likely even older than that. Unfortunately, every photo of Wharton Esherick in his bedroom has the curtain open, so it's unclear as to how long he would have been using this, but it is an accessioned object, so we're led to believe that this is something that Wharton lived with and used constantly. And over 50 years of use, it needed some TLC. Um, we needed better protection from light damage and things like that. So we replaced this curtain with the help of our friend and textile artist Dana Meyer. So that original curtain that Esherick once lived with no longer has to do the heavy lifting of taking sunlight, and it can now kind of live its life in retirement inside of a conservation grade box as an object for future study and for reference. But now, as you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we have a wonderful replacement curtain, very true to Esherick's style, with a blackout lining on the other side to better protect the objects than this original shabby curtain was doing. And to retain the original hanging structure for this curtain, Dana wonderfully reused the original eyelets and hand sewed the top of the curtain to match the way that original one hung. So here we see the eyelet on the original curtain with the pull, the eyelets after they've been harvested, and then the eyelets on the new curtain with a similar pull to match. And we also pursued another conservation project quietly in the studio this past year, mainly to address an aesthetic issue. So as you can see here on the left side of the screen, the foam inside of the cushion in the sofa rail in the museum's main gallery had degraded over time, leaving us with an upholstery cushion that was desperately in need of some TLC and was not looking its best. Thus, we engage the expertise of Richard Herzog, who's an upholsterer locally in Paoli, who's been practicing for decades and has worked with a number of museums to do this work for us. So here you can see photos of the cushion before Richard's work and after Richard's work. And I think the contrast between these photos highlights just how much of a difference this new stuffing makes to really freshen up Esherick's studio. Um, we're led to believe that this is probably the second generation upholstery that was on this sofa. Images taken in the 1960s and the 1970s show us that there was a type of June Groff fabric or fabric by the artist June Groff that was used for this. We have samples of that fabric in our collection, but we don't know what happened to the original upholstery, unfortunately. So another project that we quietly completed this past year at WEM was replacing the shingles on the studio's roof. So our building preservation specialist, Andrew Gustine, had to research where these shingles originally came from in Esherick's time and who manufactured them in order to acquire the same product or something that was as close as possible. And while these shingles are indeed, luckily, still in production, the rusty red color that Esherick used is no longer made. So Andy searched far and wide for a source and found a large collection in someone's back inventory and was able to complete this roofing work with shingles that were true to Esherick's original design, which is really wonderful. So another exciting project that we've been working on during this closure and which has really just opened up or been debuted is a new way to experience and engage with the Wharton Esherick Museum through a digital guide. So in only the last couple weeks, I want to say, we've debuted this wonderful free digital guide that is hosted through the Bloomberg Connect's phone application. And I want to give a special shout out to our team member and tour program manager, Paul, for his hard work in making this a reality. So this digital guide is meant not only to provide um, a way to engage with the Wharton Esherick Museum virtually or from afar, but it also provides a way for visitors to the Esherick Museum to spend a little more time on site and explore the grounds directly around Esherick's studio. It features a tour of the grounds with a variety of insights shared by various WEM staff, as well as audio clips of Esherick himself, clips from spotlight talks that elucidate aspects of the tour, etc. Additionally, this guide hosts information about our exhibitions, upcoming programs, highlights from our collections, and more. So it's a living document that is definitely worth keeping abreast of, just like our social media and our website and things like that. And we're really pleased to be joining the hundreds of other institutions, from museums and galleries to sculpture parks and gardens that use this service, all available to explore through a central app that you can download either on the App Store if you use an iPhone or Google Play if you use an Android. So I highly recommend checking this application out because it allows us to share our programs, our research, and the information and legacy of Esherick in new and exciting ways. So this winter, we've also been reflecting on the past year of programming and preparing for 2025 season. Our guiding theme for the 2025 year, set by our 31st annual juried woodworking show, is renewal. And here we have some highlights from past programs this year, with Your With Me program here on the right, a wonderful concert that we hosted, and then a lecture to mark the summer solstice. And we're looking forward to offering lots of new experiences for people at the Wharton Esherick Museum this coming year. And as you might have already seen, we're pleased to announce the second season of our book club Off the Shelf. So this is a program that allows us to dig into Esherick's connections, legacies, and life through a selection of the hundreds of books that line his bedroom shelves in ways and with a depth that we'd never be able to cover on a tour of Esherick's studio. So last year, we explored many of Esherick's friendships with early 20th century authors like Theodore Dreiser, Sherwood Anderson, and Jean Toomer. We also explored other aspects of our site's legacy by reading more contemporary books such as Wendy Lester's biography of Louis Kahn, You Say to Brick. And this year, we'll be exploring books that we believe must have meant a great deal to Wharton Esherick. For example, we're reading Zora Neale Hurston's 1937 novel, Their Eyes Were Watching God. While Esherick doesn't own a copy of this text in particular, which is a wonderful introduction to Zora Neale Hurston's work, he owns two other books by the author, which he had signed by her on different occasions. So that tells me that these books by Zora Neale Hurston must have meant a lot to Wharton because not only did he own these books, but he went to see her more than once and had her sign those books upon meeting her. And in addition, we'll be reading a number of other texts, including a collection of D.H. Lawrence stories, since Esherick illustrated Lawrence's 1925 book, Reflections on the Death of a Porcupine, published through the Centaur Press, where Wharton was active. Our contemporary pick for this year, which I'm really excited about because it's a little different, is Gia Tolentino's Trick Mirror. And this is a book that allows us to dig into our theme of renewal by discussing issues of contemporary wellness culture and thinking about the Esherick Studio as a place of wellness for our present day that is very much in contrast to the wellness culture that we exist in. So visit our website if you're interested in learning more about this program. Visit our website if you're interested in signing up. I will say it is a really wonderful way to read books, knowing that you will have a community of people to discuss them with afterwards, and to revisit books that you may not have read for a long time, but in a completely different way. So another project that happens during the months of January and February is preparing for the spring exhibition in our visitor center. So this spring, the museum will be putting on a very exciting exhibition that explores Wharton Esherick's trip to Europe in 1931. This exhibition was inspired by the work table loaned to the museum that's now on display in the main gallery, and you can see this table here on the left. The table was made for Esherick's friend and fellow artist Hannah Weil, who is known for her intricate ivory carvings. And the two were connected because they shared a common patron in Helene Fisher, who was one of Wharton's earliest patrons, and he was doing relatively large projects for her in the late 20s and early 30s. So our collection is home to so much material that's related to Esherick's 1931 Europe trip, where not only did he visit Hannah Weil at her home in Bavaria, but traveled around through Denmark, Sweden, and Norway as well. Esherick documented the trip with sketches, with photographs, purchasing postcards at different sites that he was interested in, and later carving blocks to print with. Thus, our brilliant director of interpretation and associate curator of special collections, Holly Gore, has been spending a lot of this winter exploring this collection, seeing what is in the best shape to exhibit, and choosing what pieces will go in our small visitor center to tell the story of this experience with as much depth and nuance as possible. So this is all to say that while we're working behind closed doors during this 2 month period, you are all still front of mind for us. The work that we can achieve now helps to shape our year of tours, programs, exhibitions, and collaborations ahead. So look out for announcements on the soon to be released tour schedule so you can make your reservations for this year. Look out for an announcement on the next spotlight, which will be held on Tuesday, February 25th, and we'll have a link to sign up to that soon. And other than that, I think it's time that we can open it up for some questions.
There are a couple questions in the chat.
Hmm.
So the first one is there a before picture of the second floor of the silo that isn't open to the public for our tours? And I did, while you were talking, go on the drive and try to find something, and I couldn't find anything quickly. Do you know of
Yeah.
anything secretly out there?
Not that I know of, but Bonnie, to answer your question, what we kind of took apart in that room was essentially the remnants of office space that had been used by the museum before we had access to the workshop. So imagine, a couple desks, maybe some computers underneath that. And before that, it had been used as a dressing room when the museum or when Wharton's home was lived in by him and his son. And then I see, what training did you have on packing of items? So that's a great question. So there's a lot of different expertise that goes into packing items. It involves expertise and knowledge, at least with Wharton's work, about grain structures of wood, about how a piece of furniture is put together, where the joins are and where the weak points are on a joint and things like that, so that when we're packing with conservation grade material that kind of involves knowledge of preservation and conservation and materiality, that those are all kind of coming together at one time. So, for example, if someone is packing up a three-legged stool, um, they're going to be using materials that won't abrade the wood, that are going to protect it from any gases that could be in the air and things like that. But we want to pay attention to, where it is being held snugly in place because wouldn't want it on the legs where it could snap something, but the seat is safer to hold different brackets and braces and things like that. So it definitely takes a holistic type of knowledge, and it involves collaboration amongst many people who have different parts of that knowledge to put together. And then I also see a question about the oral histories. So, what will we do with the oral histories now that they are restored and digitized? So, that's a great question. The world, I think, at this point is really our oyster. You know, at the base level, having access to these oral histories is a new resource for us to learn things about Esherick through his friends and family members and patrons who were interviewed. They tell really wonderful stories that illustrate not only what Esherick was like as an artist and collaborator, but as a person as well. And so this collection of oral histories can inform our research about Esherick. They'll undoubtedly inform the storytelling tours that we offer at the museum that draw from those that oral history collection and so on and so forth. And I see a couple more down here.
I'm also hoping to cut parts of the oral history out and share them on social media.
Yeah, and they'll definitely find their way into the Bloomberg app as well. We
Totally.
only did receive them as of last week, and you can imagine that it's close to a full terabyte of storage. So there's a lot to review, but we're looking forward to making the time to listen to some of the stuff that we've never been able to hear before. And then I see a question here. Do you ever have moments in which you ask yourself what Esherick would do? Because sometimes those of us in the present see things as more precious than the individuals being honored would do. So I think if I understand your question correctly, you're tapping into this idea that we treat Wharton's work differently because we help administer a museum of his work than he would have treated this stuff, having been, the stuff that he made. And that's absolutely right. So we'll make sure to link to a spotlight talk that we did earlier this year that goes into a little bit how Esherick would have traveled his works for show. Um, Wharton was undoubtedly, using crates and different systems to protect his objects. But because they weren't museum pieces, they were treated differently. So they would have never had someone accompanying them during their travels. He would have worked with a shipping agent who would have picked something up for him, brought it to a train station that could have sent it across the country for the 1939 Golden Gate Expo, and just hope that someone on the other end was going to treat it well. Um, we know that sometimes when Wharton's work was in other people's hands around exhibitions, it wasn't treated as well as we would treat it today. So we have stories of Wharton's work around his 1958 retrospective being shown on NBC, and being damaged at some point on the television show. We haven't been able to gain access to this clip, unfortunately, but it's just a kind of whole different level of security and philosophies that kind of go into dealing with this stuff nowadays. And, I think it's good that we do that. Um, Even if Wharton wouldn't, I think it's important to treat his work, with the greatest care and respect.
We also do have random conversations in like meetings where we're like, would he find what we're doing funny or over like just in general, him like being this iconic furniture maker, would he just chuckle at all of this or appreciate it or yeah, it is a thing we talk about a lot.
Yeah. So I see another comment. It appears that the sloped ceiling above the blackout curtain is surfaced with plywood. Is that so? If so, is it original to Esherick's design and how has it fared over the years? If not, what is the material? So Jonathan, let's go back to the slide here so we can see what we're talking about. So we're talking about this. So if I have your question interpreted correctly, we're talking about this wooden structure here, that is actually holding the wire that the eyelets run along. So I'd have to be in person to confirm what that is. Knowing the way that Esherick used material and thought about material, it's quite possible that it's just something like plywood. It has held up wonderfully over time, and it's a much hardier kind of material than the curtain. And every day that the museum is open to the public, we carefully open and close that curtain, open it at the beginning of the day, close it at the end of the day. And through that manual process, it's undoubtedly true that the textile takes a lot more stress than that wooden backing does to just support the textile.
I think he's asking about the sloped ceiling, but I might also be wrong.
Okay, so this sloped ceiling is actually something that we call Celotex. It's a product that was kind of a something of the mid-century, and it's made from sugarcane byproduct. If you look into their old trade catalogs and manuals, they talk about it as a material for insulation, for healthful living, and kind of new ways of approaching designing your home. Um, we know that Esherick was someone who was interested in new materials and what he could do with them. So I'm led to believe, and I could be wrong, that Esherick was interested in this material less for its insulating properties and actually more because he could paint it and it took paint really well. So on the first floor of the studio, this same material is used. And if we have it here in the photo of the studio, let's see. Um, we can see that he did, in fact, paint that. I'm going to go to the photo of the table. So up here in that corner is where the Celotex is, and along this wall too. And he painted it a kind of gray blue, and that's why we think that this was a material that he preferred. So if anyone has any more questions, you can feel free to reach out to us via email, via social media. You can find me at my email, ethan@whartonesherickmuseum.org.